Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 14th episode of Truth Tracker, a podcast dedicated to combating political misinformation within the political scene of the United States of America. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to first start off by thanking everyone for continuing to support this podcast as we continue to release our weekly episodes that help bust information within the political scene of the bust misinformation within the political scene of the United States of America. So I definitely appreciate everyone's support for the podcast. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please make sure to subscribe if you have enjoyed any one of our past episodes, as well as like any past episodes that you have enjoyed, and turn on post notifications. That way you can be notified anytime that we upload one of our new episodes. Now, with that being said, our 14th episode is going to be focused on misinformation on U.S. energy policy, as energy policy in the U.S. is often misunderstood and it has a lot of misinformation, which can lead to widespread misconceptions. And so these myths can hinder progress towards a cleaner and more sustainable energy future within America. And so in our episode, we're gonna, tackle 10 common myths regarding U.S. energy policy, as well as have our weekly civic engagement segment where we talk about the importance of being civically engaged within our communities. And so with that being said, there's no new updates on my end, and we will just get straight into this episode. The episode will function, like we said, similar to the last couple episodes. And so with that being said, let's just get straight into the 14th episode of Truth Tracker, where we will bust myths on U.S. energy policy. So the first myth is that the U.S. has plenty of untapped oil and natural gas reserves. Now, there's a sort of misconception that the U.S. has massive untapped and natural, or has massive untapped oil and natural gas reserves that can easily meet future energy demands. Now, while the U.S. does have, a large amount of these sort of reserves, they're not really they're not unlimited, and they're not really easily accessible. And so it's as a significant portion of these oil and natural gas reserves are difficult or expensive to extract due to, technological, environmental, and economic limitations, even with, current advancements in, fracking and horizontal drilling. Extracting these resources comes with a lot of trade-offs, such as, risks to groundwater, air quality, as well as seismic activity within the country. And so, as simply at the end of the day, it's important to understand that yes, the U.S. has indeed become a leader in oil and gas production, but the extraction process from these reserves is often, very resource intensive and environmentally costly. And so, furthermore, fracking and horizontal drilling technologies allow access to, natural gas and oil, but these methods often require large amounts of water, chemicals, and energy, and they can lead to significant environmental impacts such as groundwater contamination and, increased seismic activity in some regions. And so, furthermore, a lot of these oil and natural gas reserves are a lot of these oil and natural gas reserves are very hard to access and utilize, and so therefore this notion that these reserves are first off very accessible and can be used to support the U.S. energy grid is simply not true. The U.S. does not have a large amount of untapped oil and natural gas reserves, as these these large oil and natural gas reserves are not unlimited or they're not easily accessible. Furthermore, they have tons of economic, environmental, and technological limitations which prevent them from being utilized to help support the economy of the United States of America. Furthermore, continued reliance on these sort of or on oil and natural gas further exacerbates climate change, which ultimately makes it critical that the energy grid of the United States of America diversifies to include, multiple clean energy sources. And so this sort of myth that the U.S. has plenty of untapped oil and natural gas reserves is simply not true. And we got this information from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, and the Environmental Defense Fund, which are two very accurate and reliable sources that produce, accurate information regarding this topic of U.S. energy policy. So this myth is not true. Our next myth is that clean energy cannot meet U.S. Energy demand without massive land use. Now, while renewable energy technologies like solar and wind require land, their total, land use is much smaller than that's commonly assumed or associated with clean energy, especially when compared to other energy, or especially when compared to other energy sources such as fossil fuels, oil, and natural gas, because advances in land use management and offshore wind farms and solar panels on agricultural land significantly reduce the land use footprint that is used to support clean energy. In fact, renewable energy can actually be deployed in a way that coexists with other land uses. According to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, if the U.S. were to generate 80% of its electricity from wind and solar energy, it would actually use less than 0.5% of the country's total land area. And this is significantly less than the land required, for oil, oil and natural gas extraction, pipelines, and refineries, right? And so, furthermore, solar panels can be installed on, various different areas such as rooftops and parking lots, and offshore wind farms, which actually use ocean space rather than terrestrial land, are, another promising area for large scale renewable energy deployment. And so, all this evidence and research and data clearly proves that clean energy can, support the U.S. energy demand without massive land use, which makes because their total land use of clean energy is much smaller than it's commonly assumed, especially when compared to other energy sources such as fossil fuels. And so, with that being said, this myth that clean energy cannot meet the U.S. energy demand without massive land use is simply not true. And we got this information from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, as well as the United States Department of Energy. The next myth is that natural gas is a clean energy source. Now, natural gas is a clean and environmental, there's this sort of, myth that natural gas is a clean and environmentally friendly energy source because it emits less carbon dioxide than coal, for example. Now, while natural gas does emit less carbon dioxide than coal when burned, it is actually still a significant contributor to global warming, which proves that natural gas is not a clean energy source because natural gas is primarily methane, and methane is a potent, very powerful greenhouse gas that leaks during the extraction, transportation, and storage of natural gas. Methane has over 80 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide over a 20-year period, which makes its leakage with the natural gas a major concern for climate change. Furthermore, when natural gas is burned in power plants, it actually produces about 50 to 60% of the carbon emissions of coal. And so, this sort of idea that natural gas is a clean energy source is not true. Furthermore, natural gas also significantly contributes to air pollution, so including smoke and respiratory illnesses. And so, to meet climate goals and ensure a safe and sustainable future, it's important that we rapidly transition to zero emission energy sources such as wind, solar, and nuclear, and leave natural gas. And so, this sort of myth and misconception that natural gas is a clean energy source is simply not true. And we got this information from the Environmental Protection Agency as well as the International Energy Agency. The next myth is that the U.S. can't achieve net zero emissions without major economic losses. Now, the sort of overarching goal is that we should aim to achieve net zero emissions in the U.S. by 2050. That's sort of the goal that's been proposed by U.S. energy policy. And so, this first off, the U.S. can actually achieve net zero emissions without major economic losses because a transition to a net zero economy can actually generate new economic opportunities and create millions of jobs in the clean energy sector, because in this transition can lead to sustained economic growth, as economic growth is often correlated with energy security and public health benefits. Furthermore, there's multiple studies that has been released that indicate that transitioning to a clean energy economy can boost job creation in sectors like renewable energy electric vehicles, for example, energy efficiency, and clean infrastructure development. Furthermore, according to a 2021 report by the U.S. Department of Energy, the clean energy sector actually employed more than 3 million people in 2020. And so, which is actually more than the fossil fuel sector. Furthermore, an analysis from the International Renewable Energy Agency projects that global investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency could generate 85 million jobs by 2030. And so, I mean, furthermore, if you want to look at the electrical vehicle market, it's projected to employ over 500,000 people in the U.S. by 2030. And so, at the end of the day, it's clear that, through setting a goal of achieving net zero emissions, we can actually sort of boost the economy in many different sectors and ensure that our economy continues to grow. And so the sort of myth that the U.S. can't achieve net zero emissions without major economic losses is simply not true. And we got this information from the U.S. The U.S. Department of Energy, as well as the International Renewable Energy Agency. The next myth is that renewable energy is unreliable and cannot provide consistent power. Now, this is simply not true, as be, because of modern grid management systems, energy storage, and backup power sources. All of these tools can ensure a stable and reliable renewable energy supply. Furthermore, renewable energy is increasingly being paired with energy storage technologies such as batteries and hydro storage, which allows energy to be stored when production exceeds demand and used when renewable energy generation is low, which ultimately helps supply the energy grid. And so, the U.S. power grid is becoming increasingly capable of integrating renewable energy, thanks to advances in energy storage, grid modernization, and renewable energy technologies. For example, if we don't look at Tesla's large battery installations in California and Australia have demonstrated that grid scale storage can't provide backup power when solar and wind energy are not available. And so, at the end of the day, furthermore, studies by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory show that wind and solar can supply over 80% of the U.S. electricity by 2050, with appropriate combination of storage, transmission upgrades, and backup generation within the energy grid. And so, ultimately, all of these studies and research and data prove that renewable energy is a reliable energy source and can provide consistent power for the USA. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, this myth that renewable energy is unreliable, and cannot provide consistent power is simply not true. And we got this information again from the U.S. Department of Energy and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which are two very, very accurate and reputable sources that produce a lot of correct, fact-checked, and verifiable information regarding this critical topic of energy policy. Our next myth is that U.S. energy policy is only focused on oil. Now, while oil has been a central component of the country's energy policy, there has been a significant shift towards diversifying the energy grid with increased investments in renewable energy, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and carbon capture and decarbonization technologies. In fact, the U.S. is actively transitioning away from oil dependence, particularly in transportation, as the electric vehicle market is growing rapidly, with electric vehicle sales increasing by over 80% in the last 3 years. Furthermore, this shift is supported by federal and state level policies such as tax credits, mandates for electric vehicle infrastructure, and investments in green technologies. Furthermore, the federal government has been incentivizing the adoption of clean technologies in various sectors, including transportation, industry, and residential energy use, which reflects this sort of broad and substantive shift away from oil and gas towards more sustainable and renewable energy sources. And we got this information from the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as the Wall Street Journal. And so, although all that evidence clearly shows this myth that the U.S. energy policy is only focused on oil is simply not true. Our next myth is that nuclear power is unsafe and inefficient. Now, this is simply not true, as modern nuclear reactors are far safer and more efficient than older models. As it is true, older models tended to be older models tended to have more safety risks that came with them. However, modern nuclear reactors are designed with multiple layers of safety systems to prevent catastrophic accidents. Furthermore, nuclear power remains one of the few low carbon and reliable energy sources that are capable of providing energy without emitting carbon greenhouse gases. In the past, there have been many high-profile, accidents regarding nuclear energy, such as Chernobyl and Fukushima. However, new reactor designs that incorporate advanced safety features have clearly or have helped increase the safety and the reliability of nuclear energy. And currently the U.S. is actually already operating 93 commercial nuclear reactors, which shows that nuclear power is a safe way to provide energy for the U.S. energy grid. And so we got this information from the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as the World Nuclear Association. And so this sort of myth that nuclear power is unsafe and inefficient is simply not true. Our next myth is that electric vehicles are too expensive for most people. Now, electric vehicles, or essentially, while electric vehicles have, traditionally carried a higher cost in the past, prices are actually currently rapidly falling as many models are now priced, yeah, actually very comparably to traditional gasoline powered vehicles. Furthermore, there's been many federal and state incentives released, which coupled with lower operating costs can make electric vehicles a cost effective alternative to gasoline powered vehicles in the future. The price of electric vehicles has steadily decreased as actually battery technology in these cars has improved, and the economies or the electric vehicle market has substantially increased. Furthermore, uh, furthermore, electric vehicles actually offer significant savings in maintenance and fuel costs. And so, with fuel prices rising and increasing availability of electric vehicle models across various price points, electric cars are becoming a more and more accessible and fairly priced choice for many Americans to use for transportation. And so, for example, if we want to look at data, the average price of an electric vehicle in the United States fell by about 10% between 2021 and 2022 and is still expected to continue to drop in the future. Furthermore, there have been many federal tax credits and state level rebates, which make electric vehicles more affordable to a large number of consumers. And so, this sort of myth that electric vehicles are too expensive for most people is simply not true. And we got this information from the U.S. Department of Energy and Kelly Blue Book. Our next myth is that carbon capture and storage technologies are a pipe dream. Now, while these technologies do face, or these are, while carbon capture and storage technologies are a pipe dream and are not feasible. Now, while carbon capture and storage technologies, face a lot of technical and economic challenges, it is actually a viable technology that can play a crucial role in reducing emissions, particularly from industries that are hard to decarbonize, such as cement, steel, and chemical production. Furthermore, the costs of these sort of technologies have decreased as carbon capture and storage technologies have developed, having continued to develop. Furthermore, there have been furthermore the U.S. has deployed many large carbon capture and storage technologies within the country that will capture over 1 million tons of carbon dioxide. Furthermore, the U.S. government has made substantial investments in carbon capture and storage technologies through the Inflation Reduction Act, and experts believe that carbon capture and storage technologies will be essential to meeting climate goals, especially for emissions heavy industries where other solutions are less viable. And so we got this information from the Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute, and so that course kind of ties into this sort of overarching theme with use energy policy and misinformation within it, is that it's very important to again seek out accurate and reliable resources when you're speaking about a topic such as U.S. energy policy, which has such a large amount of misinformation in it. As you can see, all the sources that we've been pulling from, such as the U.S. Department of Energy, all these are all very accurate and reputable sources that just produce verifiable and fact checked information regarding this topic. And so, whenever you're trying to research information about this topic to educate yourself, it's very important to use accurate sources to make sure that you are receiving verifiable and fact checked and reputable information that is not inaccurate at all. And so, this sort of myth that carbon capture and storage technologies are not feasible is simply not true. Our final myth for today is that the size of the U.S. is too large to transition to renewable energy. Now, despite its vast land size, the U.S. is actually well positioned to transition to renewable energy, partly because of a combination of diverse clean energy sources, advances in energy grid technology, as well as regional energy sharing capabilities. Furthermore, the country's vast geography allows for the harnessing of wind, solar, and geothermal energy in different regions, which provide a diverse and reliable energy mix. The U.S. has actually already made significant strides towards renewable energy, as renewable energy has, continued to rise in the proportion of, for example, the total electricity it's generating. Renewable energy now accounts for nearly 20% of total electricity generated in the country. Furthermore, advanced grid technologies and energy storage solutions are enhancing the reliability and flexibility of renewable energy systems. And so, furthermore, federal investments in clean energy and grid modernization are also helping to accelerate this transition to renewable energy, as renewable energy can help create a safer and sustainable future for the country. And we got this sort of myth, or since we got all this information from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, as well as the U.S. Department of Energy. And so this sort of myth that the U.S. is too big to transition to renewable energy is simply not true, as the U.S. is very well positioned to make this transition, due to increasing investment in renewable energy and advancements in clean energy technologies. And so this myth that the U.S. is too big to transition to renewable energy is simply not true. Now we are going to continue. We are going to sort of go into our weekly civic engagement segment, where we talk about the importance of becoming civically engaged within your communities. And so, obviously, for the last ever since the podcast has been created, our segments have all have been focused on the importance of voting in the last election. But now that the election is over, we're going to kind of talk about how to stay civically engaged even after major elections are over. So, there's many benefits to being civically engaged, as civic engagement offers numerous benefits. First off, there's many benefits to civic engagement. As first off, civic engagement can create stronger communities. When citizens are involved in the politics and the decision making of their community, they can advocate for better public services, infrastructure, and programs that can meet the needs of their communities. And so, furthermore, being civically engaged in your community can actually lead to improved public policy, as when people actively participate in political processes, they can help ensure that policies reflect the needs and the desires of the populations, or of the people. Civic engagement actually allows people to hold elected officials and public servants accountable for their actions and ensure that they serve the best interests of the public. And so, especially if you're passionate about a topic such as U.S. energy policy, it's important to become civically engaged in your community and surrounding that topic. That way, you can, or whether it be participating in town halls or holding events, or reaching out to the political leaders of your community. Becoming civically engaged around, especially if you're passionate about U.S. energy policy, being civically engaged around that specific topic can help you create specific create specific positive political change in your community. Furthermore, being civically engaged gives individuals the power to voice concerns, influence decisions, and actively shape their society in order to create positive change. And so, being civically engaged in causes that you care about, provides a sense of purpose and fulfillment for you, and it really allows you to be an active member of your community. Furthermore, actually, if you look at our democracy as a country, civic engagement and participation is the backbone of it, because when more people get involved, it leads to better representation in decision making and more, inclusive governments. And so, at the end of the day, being civically engaged has first off has many, economic, educational, social benefits for our country. And it also allows us to create a more just society where, citizens can push for system. It can create a more just society where citizens can push for systems that provide, equitable access to education, healthcare, and various opportunities. And so, being civically engaged can lead to long-term change in these issues, which can possibly affect future generations in our country. And so, if you have any questions on how to become civically engaged in your community, please reach out, drop them in the comments. We will definitely make sure to reply, as this is one of the big this is a very big advocating for civic engagement is a big part of this podcast, and it's something that we want to continue to make sure. And so if we were gonna, and so like we said, our final message, become civically engaged in your local community, as this country, especially I get, sorry, I guess the thing that I'm trying to say is that it's very important to, become civically engaged in your community, and which can allow you to affect positive political change and set this country up for success in the future. And so, with that being said, that wraps up our 14th episode of Truth Tracker. In this episode, we busted 10 myths on 10 myths regarding U.S. energy policy, as well as had our weekly civic engagement segment. With that being said, if you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the channel as well as like this episode if you have enjoyed it, and as well as turn on post notifications. That way, you can be notified anytime that we upload one of our weekly episodes. With that being said, thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. It definitely means a lot, and have a great day.